Hey everyone, thank you for joining me. So today's project is going to be the Sanjo from Boker Knives. This is a great design by Guy Paghetti, and love this thing, and I can't wait to give it some more flavor. So what I'm going to use today is the curly maple. You guys can see here, beautiful material, really nice chatoyancy, and then you guys commented on the previous video or the unboxing video to use the maple or the spalted maple here. So I'm going to be using that as well. As you can see, really nice chatoyancy as well. Now I'm going to be upgrading the hardware to T8 screws. Now how I got a hold of these was with my Civivi replacement pocket clip. So you can see it comes with extra screws. So that's how I got access to these extra screws. Plus I had a bunch lying around, and these do come in handy. Same thread, the head size is the exact same, so not really much to worry about there. And I'll leave a link in the description below where you can pick some of these up. Highly recommend these to upgrade your Civivi pocket clips. And then I created a little window with a piece of paper of the original scale. That way I can select which part of the scale material that I want to use. So just a nice little hack I found. So what I'm going to do is sacrifice a set of original scales because I have two of these knives. So you can see I already drilled a hole through it. This is going to make life a lot easier for me when I have to locate the hole underneath the material, or in this case right here. Obviously it doesn't go all the way through, but this will be a nice tool to locate that hole. And then obviously I'll be creating a custom backspacer. I'll be getting rid of the lanyard section hole just because I'm not a fan of lanyards, and I think it'll look a lot cleaner. But that's pretty much it, you guys. Enough talking about it. Let's get right to it. So here I'm just disassembling the Sanjo. And one thing I like about this model is that there's not that many screws involved. So when customizing scales, there's a lot of assembly and disassembly. So since there's not that many involved here, it makes life a lot easier. Now I'll be taking that paper window that I created earlier to locate the section of the material I want to use. So I found the section that I'd like to use. I think it had the most chatoyancy and the most color, so that is what I ended up with. Now I decided to use the CNC to create the hardware holes. Not only is this more precise, but if I do plan on creating more scales in the future, I have it in my computer and it's just really fast to knock it out. Also, I kept the inner holes a lot smaller, and I'll mention why I did that here in just a sec. Here I'm just outlining the shape of the original scales onto the new material. That way I have a guide of how much material to remove around that shape. Now here you can see I use the hardware to screw the original scale onto the new material. Again, that's why I like to leave the holes a little bit smaller. And I was able to countersink the pivot pin hole, as you can see right there. Now I'm just taking the material and clamping it into my vise, and I'll be using my cutoff wheel to remove the excess material around the outline I just did earlier. That way I'm not cutting off too much. Also keep in mind to give yourself just a little bit of extra room on the outside of that line. Next thing I'll be doing is taking the material to the belt sander, and I'm using 60 grit here to remove a lot of the material fast. And also keeping in mind to give myself a little extra room around that perimeter just in case there's any slip-ups. Here I'm just using a large milling bit to manually remove material on each scale. That way they are the same thickness and I can go on from there. As you can see here, I installed the new material onto one side of the liners, and I'm using the other liner as a guide against that router bit to rough cut the shape of the liners onto the new material, and it just makes things a lot easier, faster, and I'll just have to do some hand sanding here in a bit just to kind of fine tune it, make it look a lot better on the edge. Here I'm using a cutoff piece from the material to create a custom backspacer. As you can see, I am using the original backspacer as a template. I marked the holes, and I will be drilling just one hole all the way through that's slightly smaller than the hardware. That way I can screw in the original backspacer onto the new material and use that as a template. Here I'm just using the hardware to hold the original backspacer onto the new material, and then I'll be tracing the shape of that backspacer onto the new material. Now that I have the shape of the backspacer onto the new material, I can now enlarge the hole on the new backspacer to accept the hardware. That way it doesn't tighten in, it actually just goes in smoothly. Here I'm just putting the new backspacer into the vise and using a handsaw to remove a majority of the material. That way I don't run the risk of chipping this material since it's a little bit on the softer side. And then after that, what I'll do is take the belt sander with that same 60 grit and remove a good chunk of that material really fast and get it close to those lines that I made. Again, keep giving myself just a little bit of extra room. Next, I installed the new backspacer onto the liners and the scales, and again using the scales as a guide on that router bit to get that exact shape that I want. And this allows me to also leave just a little bit of extra room on that backspacer just so it's raised up just a hair over the liners. Here I installed the liner lock side to the new material and am tracing the liner lock recessed area onto the bottom side of the material, which I am happy with here. Then I'll take this to the drill press, which I have a mill installed, a small one, and am just manually milling out that recessed pocket. That way the knife can function when it's assembled. Here I'm just using some sandpaper to manually remove material on both scales so that they're the same thickness. And I brought it just above the hardware. That way you can see the hardware, but it's not protruding any further than that. I quickly assembled the knife with the liners and the new scales and placing it in my vise. And I'll be using various tools to hold the sandpaper, either flat or curved, in order to clean up the edges of the scales. That way it just looks a lot cleaner and the edges of the scales are the exact same height. As you can see here, I fully assembled the knife. That way when I draw my guidelines onto the scales, they match up with certain lines on the blade. And it took me a while, but I think what I came up with is going to look good and I am happy with it. So again, I will be using these guidelines as a template when I remove material with the Dremel and with some sandpaper. Now I'm using my Dremel with 80 grit sandpaper to remove a good chunk of that material where I drew my lines. Again, keeping a safe distance away from that line, not removing my guidelines, so that way when I take it to the next step, which is doing this manually with sandpaper and certain tools, I can stay within my guidelines. Here I'm just taking a flat piece of steel to wrap my sandpaper around, and I'm using my vise to hold this knife in place as I work on the scales, creating those really crisp lines, and not only keeping them crisp but keeping them very flat and clean. And it's tough to see on camera, but they are there, and I had to make sure that they were the same on each side. But again, this is where you really want to take your time and be very, very patient. So the new hardware is just a little bit too long. So what I did was I created a tool out of white G10, and I countersunk it to the exact length I need the new hardware to be. And as you can see, there's a little bit sticking out, but I took it to the belt sander and I removed the material exactly where I needed it to be. And then I created another tool to hold the hardware in place while I take some sandpaper and clean up the sharp or rough underside edges of the hardware. That way there's no issue when installing it. Here I'm just taking some Tung Oil and putting a good amount on the new scales. That way it can soak it up. And as you can see, really brings out that color and really shows off that chatoyancy. I think it looks really good, and I couldn't be happier with the result on both of these scales. All right, all finished with customizing the knives, and I'm going to give you guys a quick walkthrough of what I created here. Obviously, I created the custom scales and created some custom backspacers to match the scales. Here is the green mango. Really nice, and it does have that chatoyancy at the right angle, so you guys can see light to dark. Like I stated in the beginning of the video, I got rid of the lanyard section just because I think it looks a lot better, and you get to see more of the cool material. And then here is the spalted maple one. This one was a little tricky since it's a little on the brittle side towards the bottom, but you do get those black streaks since it is a spalted maple. Again, complementing the scales. I also etched and stonewashed, or actually I just stonewashed the pocket clip because they weren't originally, which is kind of weird because everything else is stonewashed. But I think it complements the liners and the blade very well. Really happy with these. And really quick, let me show you the custom scales. Now, the camera doesn't do these justice, but in person, you can really see that chatoyancy. And I'll do my best to get it on camera, but it's really difficult for some reason. I guess the camera can't handle the awesomeness of that chatoyancy. But really happy with the green mango. I love the splash of color. And then here is the spalted maple. And again, that chatoyancy is hard to get through on camera, but it is there in person. And obviously I added tung oil to the scales to really make them pop. And you got this really cool dark golden look to the spalted maple. And just a deeper blue-green kind of aqua color to the mango. Now for the hardware, since I upgraded to the T8 hardware on both of these knives, I decided to go with a satin finish on the green mango here, the curly mango. And then I liked these black streaks in the spalted maple, so I ended up using black hardware to complement it. And I'll give you guys a closer look on each one once I have these assembled. Almost forgot, I wanted to mention that the pocket clip, the screws weren't long enough to reach the liners. So I actually had to use a mill bit to make that pocket a lot deeper in order for the screws to reach those liners. So I was able to save the pocket clip and use the original. So really happy with that, but that's pretty much it. Enough talking about it. Let's put these together and see what they look like. So here they are all assembled. We'll take a look at the green mango first. Again, really, really nice chatoyancy. I wish the camera would pick it up. Here it is, all the way around. Pocket clip side. Again, I really do like the satin finish against the green. I think it looks really, really good. I was debating on whether I should heat anodize it gold. I think that would look good with the green as well. But I am pretty happy with it. Action on these still work really, really good. And I made sure to copy the original, and I put that little groove in there so you have easier access to the liner lock, which helps a lot. Your thumb does slide in there perfectly, so really happy with that. But let me give you guys a close-up look of it opened up. In the customization part of the video, I wanted to take the top of the grind, you can see here this nice curve, and match it into the scale. I don't know if you can see it, but I'll try to get some light on it. But you can see right there, it flows from there onto here, and it goes up to the top in the back of the scale. Just thought it looked really good. Then I created some nice bevels here in the front for a pinch grip. So if you do want to pinch grip it and get some nice, more precise cuts, you do have a more comfortable grip. And then I just mirrored this, but the opposite. So created the same chamfer in the back. You can see right there. Now these scales are a bit on the chunky side. I might have to thin them down somehow, but it feels great in hand, especially with those chamfers. I think the ergos are amazing on this knife. You can choke up on that front finger choil there, or the sharpening choil really, but you can choke up there. Ergos are really good. Pocket clip is fantastic. I've had no issues with this knife, just the way it came from the factory. But of course, again, I wanted to give it some flavor, so that is what I did with this one. Let's check out that backspacer really quick. Again, matching the scales. The chatoyancy is there, but again, the light just won't pick it up, or the camera won't pick it up. And I made it just a hair higher than the liners, just to get some more of that cool color. I did create a small bevel to hide behind the liners. I think it just gives it a little extra touch of class. But really happy with this one. Let's check out the spalted maple. Exactly the same thing. Some oils from my hand, but exactly the same thing. Pinch grip chamfers. Same with the flow of the grind. Matches over here. Again, tough to pick up, but ergos are just as good. Again, love this knife. If you guys don't have one, I highly recommend it. If you're looking for a project similar to this one, I think it's a good way to go since it does have full liners. Here it is, pocket clip side. And then I'll show you the show side since it does have the black hardware, which I think looks really, really good. I'm glad I decided to go with that. I think it complements it very well. Action is still very good, very snappy, drop shutty. And again, I created that little pocket there so your thumb has access to the liner. Works beautifully. As always, you guys, let me know down below of what you guys think of how these things turned out. I really appreciate your guys' input. And let me know which one you guys would pick. These will be up on the website soon. So if you guys are interested in picking these up, they will be up there as soon as I can get them up there. But there they are, the two custom Sanjos from Boker. Again, a Guy Paghetti design, which I love his designs. One day I will get one of his customs, but for now, these will do. Again, thank you very much for the support. I really, really appreciate it. And I will see you guys, ooh, so close, on the next one.